very lucky to have, what did you sign up for? The nebular Kathleen Forsythe. Not in the spacey sense, but in the starry sense.
Thank you. I'm not sure, I don't like this thing at all, so do it like this. One of the things that impressed me today was the vibrancy and excitement that I feel from all of you about writing. And my father would have loved that. I brought some books today I'm going to give your board of directors, and it's this book called The Vision of Fred, Conversations with Fred on the Nature and Function of Poetry. And I'm going to read one paragraph from it in a poem from him. And one of the reasons why I think he would have been just lovely delighted today was because he really fundamentally believed in the act of writing poetry, not as an academic pursuit at all, but as a very powerful human form of expression. And we lived in New Westminster 10 years ago when he died, and on the day I took him to the hospital, to Royal Columbian, when he actually never got out of hospital after that, we had to stop at the post office to mail the galleys for this book. And it didn't come out until he was actually dead. And the book was written over the last year of his life. When he lived with me for 2 or 3 years before he died. He was 88 when he died. And he had lived in New Brunswick most of his life. And when his third wife died, when he was about 84, 85, it was clear he couldn't actually live by himself. He didn't want to go into a home, so I said, why don't you come to BC and live with me? So I drove him and 10,000 books in a 3-ton truck across Canada. That's all we brought with the books and Fred and me in this 7-8 day journey from New Brunswick to Vancouver. So he lived the last few years of his life. I asked what he wanted to do. He says, I want to write poems and watch baseball. Because he was an avid baseball fan, and he has a lot of baseball poems as well. Every morning he would get up at 6 in the morning and start with 6 words and write a sestina, and I'll read you one of those today. It's the most difficult form of poetry in the English language, and he was a master at it. And he didn't master the computer. He was a wonderful typist. So I would get up and transcribe it. And in that 3 years, the last part of his life, where we lived, and I was his sort of literary companion, come housekeeper, he actually published 4 books. So he's extremely prolific right to the end of his life. His last book, which is not published, was being edited while he was in the hospital, and it was called Pelagius and Augustine, or What Went Wrong with Christianity. So I'm going to read from this book, which was a series of conversations he and I had as he would write these poems. I would come in with my tape recorder, and I would say, what are you doing? And he would tell me, and I would record it, and then I transcribed it into this series of conversations. There's also an essay in this particular book on the nature and function of poetry that was written 30 years ago. And I found it in an old box, and I said, when was this published? And he said, oh, nobody published it. And I said, well, I think it's going to be this book. So it did, it became this book. So I'll read you the last 2 paragraphs because I think it speaks to the heart of your organization and what you want it to be. The true poem, as opposed to the non-poem, offers its readers an alternate universe to that in which they normally dwell. If it is sufficiently well done, it will offer a universe that coheres sufficiently for them to accept it imaginatively, even though their own innate prejudices might have normally led them to reject it. As a result of meeting alternate universes in this way, readers can come to realize the wonder, the variety, and the possibilities of life. Hence, the trap of circumstances in which they find themselves may become at the same time both more galling and less inevitable. As William Blake wrote, we become what we behold. Therefore, if we behold only machines and stereotypes, we tend to become only machines and stereotypes, and to atrophy within those areas of our minds that exist to make us more. If we read true poems, however, and hence obtain multiple visions of reality, we are generated into feelings, actions, and imaginative ventures that are bound to make us and the society of which we are members more than we would otherwise have become. If poetry needs any social justification, apart from what it gives personally to its practitioners, this is it. The sestina is a very difficult form, and I won't try to explain it. I think I did a good job in this particular book, and you can also look up a small website I started called fredcogswell.com, and it was an attempt to do a website in tribute of the sestinas, and I ran out of steam because I have so many other things I'm doing, but it does have enough in it for you to get a sense of what it is about. And I'm just going to read you, this is a book called Meditations 50 Sestinas. There must be 150 in his repertoire, but I'm going to read you this one. And as George said, Fred could write free verse. Of course he could, but he could also write any other form there was and make it seem as if it was free verse. That to me is the true craft of the poet. And it's only when we know the form, so the form liberates us and we can do anything with it, that I think that we're really free, whether we are artists or poets or novelists. So, recipe for old age. When the air turned velvet after sundown, and folds and edges blurred to form one dark, my nostrils breathed in fresh-cut clover scent, with all the quiet hush of summertime. It was as if the years between were not, and I stood there, once more a 12-year-old. That moment came like oxygen to old and weary lungs, but as I gulped it down, the force it fired burst through the what was not of my illusions, and laid bare the dark kernel old age most dreads at clover time. The scent of drying hay is a death scent. Was it kind or cruel, that moment sent to jump the gap between young days and old, and spark a poem's arc light out of time? It matters not, for as the years run down, I am grateful, caught in the rising dark, for non-routine, whether it lasts or not. Like this moonrise I watch, though it is not at all epiphany or something sent to give me comfort. Yet when from a dark cloud's ragged edge I glimpse that globe outrolled and feel its wealth of silver light rain down, caught in its beauty, I forget the touch of time. So it has been with me, time after time, in every place I've been. There is not a waking day that does not bring its own individuality in shape, scent, tone, and color, transforming both the old and new, till nothing is mere light or dark. The while I watch the flow of light and dark inside the vast kaleidoscope of time, I can forget that I grow weak and old and interact with time till time is not, wrestling with every changing pattern sent for shapes to fix in words and then write down. On deeds alone, the scent of death is dark. Who acts becomes the slave of space and time. I'll set down words, for thoughts do not grow old. What you may not know is that there are 6 words he has chosen, and these 6 words appear in different combinations at the end of each of the stanzas, and then they must all occur in the last 3. And so there's this very complex form, which I consider almost like a DNA form, that when you get it mastered, as he has done in the many, many sestinas, he liberates thought, he liberates the sound and the music of the language. And it was this that intrigued me. I didn't live with my father for most of, after I was 18, I had left home. And I didn't live with him again until I was in my 50s. And so I didn't have that other life with him. But all of a sudden, in the last stages of his life, I got to live in a very intimate way with this highly creative being, and to try and understand, not as his daughter, but as a fellow creative being, what was it? How did he sustain this level of creativity that he was writing to the moment of his death? And that he believed in poetry so absolutely fundamentally that he altered the course of the history of our country with it, and touched the lives of so many people, including Candace, which is why I'm here today. So, I'm also a writer and a poet. I'm a novelist, and I'm also an artist. And unfortunately, my current incarnation prevents me from doing any of them at the moment. But you've inspired me to think that I could come to your events and continue on, because you can't be a writer and a poet and not write. So I brought one small poem of my own. And then I'm done. Okay. Bonding is a heart conversation. Bonding is a heart conversation between the heartbeat and the breath. Between the heartbeat and the breath, I am a wave that flies, I am a wing that flows. Bonding is a heart conversation between the heartbeat and the breath. I am a wave that flies, I am a wing that flows. I breathe wave wings through the center of myself. Deep in the time of distinctions, deep in the time of distinctions, deep in the time of distinctions, the space we perceive, deep in the time of distinctions, the space we perceive, the conversation between the lace webs of light that bond among the cells. Bonding is a heart conversation between the heartbeat and the breath. I'm a wave that flies, I'm a wing that flows. I breathe wave wings through the center of myself, deep in the time of distinctions, the space we perceive, the conversation between the lace webs of light that bond among the cells, from cell to cell, in relations of harmony. In the moment of conception, in the moment of conception, in the moment of conception, we perceive the conversation. We perceive the conversation. Bonding is a heart conversation.